if you're going to change an area, you do three things. Number one, you focus on it and you get clear and compelling vision for what you want. If your body's not where you want it to be, I tell you there's one simple reason. It's not your focus. No, I focus on it. I focus all the time on how fat I am. No. See, if you focus on crashing into the pole, trying not to, the more you try not to, what you focus on, that's where the energy goes, that's where you go, right? We all know that. But what people tend to do is, I'm saying focusing on what you want, not what you don't want. And not only just focusing on what you want, where you focus and say, well, I'd like to be strong, I'd like to be energetic, I'd like to be fit. It's focusing and making it compelling. If your only reason you're focusing on it is like, well, I need to lose some weight because I feel fat, versus I want the energy to burn because with that I'll have more passion, more aliveness, I'll be able to impact my children. I'll be able to, I'll be able to take the business to another level. I'll be able to have fun when I'm stressed out and tired. I'll have creativity flowing through me. You can't just focus on it. You've got to create a clear and compelling future in that area that will pull you towards it so you're not trying to push yourself. If there's an area you're not improving in, think of three pillars, if you would. Pillar one is get focused and clear. What's compelling? Where are you? Really? And don't lie. Where do you want to be? And make it so compelling you can't help it. When you wake up in the morning, you want to transform this area of your life. So the quality of your life already is better just because you are so excited about what you're after. When you do that with your body or your emotions or your finances or time or any other area and you start focusing and you're clear, you're going to have energy. You're going to have drive. You're going to start to do something. How do you make sure what you do really works? You need the second pillar. And think of this as three pillars. Because, two-legged stool is going to fall over. One leg, you can't sustain. Second pillar, you got to get the best. When I say get the best tools. Get the best map. Get the best mentor. What I'm looking for is, it's wonderful that you're focused and clear and excited, but if you're running east looking for a sunset, you got a problem. I don't care how much you believe, I don't care how much enthusiasm you have, you got the wrong tools. You got the wrong strategy. You got the wrong map. And so it's really critical in life, I believe, to get a map and get a mentor. Because the map very often changes. And the best mentor, somebody who's the best at what they do, they know the shortcuts, don't they? Or they know when the roads change. You don't get stuck hanging out, in the desert when you're trying to get to the ocean, metaphorically. So I've always focused on not just finding somebody good, but who's the best at it, who's got the best tools. Think of that first pillar as a target. You're crystal clear on the target. And now you got the toolbox, man. You got the best tools, not rinky-dink tools, the very best. And the way to get the best, by the way, that I've done it is model someone who's already successful. All the tools I come up with, some I've obviously created, but the foundation came by standing on the shoulders of other giants. I went out and found somebody that's already got the result. Why reinvent the wheel? Success leaves clues. Find the best, figure out what they're doing, do that. Alter it, find your view of it, but start with what already is working rather than starting from scratch and trial and error. But if you've got that focus, the target, and you got the toolbox, and you're still not getting what you want, it's because you got inner conflicts. That's the third pillar. You've got to resolve your inner conflicts. Because as I try to explain to you, 80% of success in anything is your psychology and 20% is the mechanics. So those inner conflicts are when you take 2 steps forward and you pull 3 steps back. Right? When you say, boy, I'm totally committed to this, but you don't follow through. This is my expertise, the why guy part. Why? Why do you keep saying you want this? You have crystal clarity, you have the tools, and you're still not getting it? There's a conflict in you. You want to be totally successful, but you're afraid at some level that if you are totally successful, you will not be loved. You'll be rejected. You want to be in a position where you have total free time and you want to build a billion-dollar enterprise. These are conflicts. You really, truly know you got the tools and talents to make this happen, but a part of you doesn't think you deserve to succeed because of something you did at some point in your life or something you made up. Or you think making money or being successful economically is not spiritual. And you're committed to being spiritual, and yet the other part of you, it's the inner conflicts between fighting parts. So what do we do in this third pillar? Think of it as a vault we got to unlock. Think of it as unlock and unleash. That's the third pillar. The way you unlock and unleash is you identify the conflicts. You get clear what they are. So you may have total clarity, even the tools, but how can you totally unleash and commit when you're being pulled in 2 different directions? You say, Tony, how do I solve that? There isn't one way. You've got to get clear about what's most important to you today, not what you think you should do based on an old blueprint, an old belief system, your parents, society, your friends. Otherwise, you'll succeed and not be fulfilled. So once you identify the conflicts, now what you got to do is align. Align your life with what you really value. Align your life with what is most important to you. And then once you are in a position where you're aligned, guess what you'll do? Take action. You won't have to work at it. When everything's in alignment, there's nothing pulling you away, boom, you go for it. But when you say, I want a relationship, but at the same time, simultaneously, I want to be in a position where, I never have to, I only get what I want every moment, or I never have to commit to anything, then obviously you're never going to get there. That inner conflict must be resolved. Once you align and you take action, guess what's going to happen? You're going to achieve. And once you achieve, you succeed. When you succeed, I'll tell you what you got to add to it. Celebrate, right? And then contribute. Pay it forward, if you will, as corny as that sounds. Remember the movie? Pay it forward. Don't pay it back. Take what you've got, what you've learned, and bring it to someone else. And if you bring it to someone else, it continues that cycle of fulfillment, of joy, of meaning in your life. Everything works.
Tony Robbins is perhaps one of the country's best-known motivational speakers and life strategists, and during tough times like these, a little strategy can't hurt, and a little cheering as well. Well, Tony was here earlier this morning talking about using fear to your advantage, and now he's back to answer your email questions. Hey, Tony, thanks for sticking around.
Thank you.
Well, let's get right to it, because we've got Lisa in Virginia, and she's trying to stay positive. She writes, it's hard enough to keep myself positive in the way the markets are going these days, but it's even harder when my husband is very nervous and is making me more nervous, too. How do I deal with the situation when I'm having to keep both of us from worrying too much?
I'd say the first thing you got to do is educate yourself. And what I mean by that is educate yourself about people who've done well in these tough times. Because it's happened before. I mentioned earlier Sir John Templeton, the greatest investor of all time. He made all of his money when markets were crashing. And so I put him on our site, thepowerofcrisis.com. And you can go watch that. Let your husband watch it. You watch it and educate yourself. Second thing is, I've been coaching for 16 years now, one of the top 10 financial traders of all time. He's an amazing man. He writes me every single day. I coach him once a week or once every 2 weeks. So I called him last night because this is a man who in 1987, when the market crashed, he made $500 million that day when everybody's afraid. So let me tell you what he said. He said two things. In the short term, he predicted what was going to happen today. He said, I think we can have some rallies, but he said, I don't think it's the bottom yet. In fact, I think it could go down another 20 to 30%, could even be 40. Now, a lot of people hear that and freak out.
Yeah, that's not very uplifting, Tony.
No, but it is. Robert Prechter is a man who's a friend of mine also. He wrote a book in 1978 where he said the biggest bull market's coming when we were at 800. It's gone 14 times that on the Dow. I called him up and he said, look, Tony, think of it this way. Stocks that were $50 are now selling for 10 or even 5. There's a great chance, based on what happened in the 30s, even what happened in the 70s, some of those will sell for $5. They'll go down to 1 or even 25 cents. But here's what happened in the 30s and in the 70s. In a 6-month period, if you were at 25 cents, it's not going to go back to $50, but it might go to 5. That's a 2,000% return that could happen in 6 months. People need to know that if you stay strong and smart, save your money, be intelligent, this could be the greatest opportunity since you've been alive. Not being positive based on real history.
So what you were talking about then is just having kind of grit. And I think that, we forget how much grit we have.
I agree with you.
Especially because we get so comfortable in the life that we think is going to always stay the same.
That's right.
And what we have to remember is we are human beings who have tremendous grit. And in this country, we've proven that. And it's tough. Now, it's hard, however, to explain this to your children. We've got a good question here from Hannah. She's from Massachusetts. She writes, my children watch the news every morning. How do I make sure that they know what's going on in this crisis, but don't get them scared about their lives and our family's welfare? This is a big issue.
It's a great question. I think you have to understand what we flood ourselves with, we experience. And right now, if you turn on the television, it's bread lines and people saying sell everything. And they even may be right. But for your children, they need resiliency. They need to know there's a compelling future. And the best way to do that, frankly, is not just to protect them, but to show them examples of people that have been through it all. So Casey, who was on your show today, this young man lost his arm, and he's as happy as he can be, totally excited about his life and trying to help other people. So again, I'm not just plugging it, but I created this community called thepowerofcrisis.com. People go there from all over the world, and they share their stories. They were raped and they transformed. They lost everything financially. And at the end of it, they'll tell you how I'm better today. If I know at the time I didn't want it to happen, but if it hadn't, I wouldn't be who I am today. I'm happier, I'm stronger, I'm richer inside. And I think if kids hear enough examples of like that, it starts to stick. Whatever you feed them, they're going to experience. So you've got to feed in those great examples.
My dad always told me that tough times are going to make you stronger.
That's right.
That's always the thing to say. Okay, Roger from New York, he worries that his own worry has gone beyond his control. He writes, what do I do when I feel the fear paralysis that happens when my mind starts to run wild? It seems like there is a cascade of doom and gloom thoughts, and I can't seem to take any action. I just worry. You know, people who are not used to having that emotion are having it these days.
Well, we've all had it at different times of our lives. We just forget. And I think what he has to do is, what's a time in your life that you had an enormous crisis, but what pulled you through? Again, we have people go through on that site and answer 5 questions. And what it basically does is help you figure out, where was this crisis before? You may have even forgotten about. What pulled you through? What belief? What strategy? What experience? Who helped you? What triggered you? And then what did you do that made that shift? But I would also say, remember one affirmation, if you would, in your mind and your body. Own the fact that money is not your life. This is just money. I mean, when I was told I had a tumor in my brain, later on, years later, when I thought I might lose my wife to cancer, I'm going to tell you something. Money doesn't matter at all. But when we get focused on what matters most, we're there. So I mentioned earlier, getting physical is really important because fear is a physical thing. So if you sit around and think about it, not just exercise, going for an intense run, lifting weights, something that pumps the blood and oxygen through you, because when you do that, your entire psychology changes. You see the world through a different place. So I'd say it's contrast of other people's great stories. Model the best that's in you. When have you been through these things before? You've been resilient if you're honest with yourself. And get totally physical and make that a ritual for you. And then you'll start to look for role models of how to turn things around.
Can I add one?
Yes, please.
Hug people.
Oh, I love that. Well, come here.
Come here. Hug people. And just, you know, and embrace human beings who are all around you, and make sure that you're a good friend so that they can be a good friend to you, and you'll feel better.
I think the most important thing you do is get outside yourself. If you go out and try to help somebody else, we have a basket brigade, and we feed 3 million people a year at Thanksgiving from all over the world. And it's because somebody fed my family. When you go out and help somebody else, you realize you have no problems.
You realize how lucky
you are. And you feel like
are.
You have something to give. And we all need meaning in our life. We don't want to just get. The life now is about what can you give. That's what'll light you up.
Tony Robbins, I'm feeling lucky because I got a hug from you today.
I've always wanted to know the answer to a question. I've been obsessed by the question of what makes the difference in people's lives. I was not popular in school. I loved people. So I was passionate about figuring out what's the difference in people. You know, why is it that some people are given everything? You know, the type, they really do have parents that love them, that are there for them. They have tremendous educational background. They have all the economic resources, and they end up spending their life going in and out of a rehab. You know, they had all the resources. And then you meet somebody who's been, you know, abused, or no one's been there for them, or they've been physically abused or sexually abused, or the worst things you could possibly happen to a human being. And they turn out to be some of the finest human beings you'd ever meet in your life, who are out there working to help other people and make a difference. So we all want to believe that our lives have turned out because of our biography. And the reality is we can all find people with a horrible biography who have an extraordinary life, and we have people with an extraordinary biography who have a life that none of us would want to trade with. So what's the real challenge? And I believe that the challenge in relationships and in life, in every area, is emotional fitness. That it starts with how emotionally fit you are in a relationship. And there are patterns that make people emotionally unfit. There are patterns that make people frustrated. There are patterns that make people depressed. There are patterns that make people angry. There are patterns that make people feel sorry for themselves. And there are also patterns that make people compassionate, playful, physically passionate, emotionally strong. You know, there are different patterns, and they stand out to you when you've been around that many people. So I've had now 50 million people get my books and tapes, but I've been with 3 million people face-to-face from 80 countries. And when you're around those many people, the pattern becomes clear. And I've been able to use those patterns, and that's what I want to kind of expose you to tonight. And frankly, you know, I think these patterns are common sense. But, you know, how many of you notice that common sense is not too common? You know, everybody's like, oh, yeah, that's simple. But, you know, a lot of people say, I know this stuff. Well, if you're not doing it, you don't know it. You understand it. And understanding and $3 will almost get you a cup of Starbucks these days, you know? It's really nice to understand things, but that doesn't change anything. You got to get in your body and actually do it. But I've learned enough of these patterns that now, over the last, 20 years or so, of the 30 years of my career, I'm the guy that gets the call when the fire starts. You know, when the athlete is burning down on national television and something's got to be done right now to turn them around. And, you know, I either get them or I don't, and for 30 years I've gotten them. That's how I've built my reputation. And that you've got to produce results right now. And I'm able to do that because of an understanding of these need structures I'm going to talk to you about. Or I get the call when the child is going to commit suicide, or the adult. And in 30 years, you know, knock on wood, I've never lost one suicide in 30 years. That doesn't mean I won't someday, but I never have, not one single time out of the thousands of suicide attempts. And it's again because of understanding these needs I'm going to talk to you about. I get the phone call, you know, in the middle of the night, true story, and it's the President of the United States saying, Tony, they're going to impeach me in the morning. What should I do? And I say, could you have called me sooner? You know, true story, you know. So in the experience of looking to make those changes and looking at how to change, same thing in relationships, you know, couples that are gone. The films that I wanted to make with Chloe said, let's not make films with couples that have troubles. Let's make couples that look like they've gone beyond the edge. By anybody's estimate, there's no way to turn it around. Because by that extreme, when someone watches the film, they look at their own life and they go, oh my God, these people can do it. And they did here, I could do it too. That's the contrast we want. But the basis of all that I do comes down to knowing that the difference in your life, your relationship, your physical life, your emotional life, any aspect of your life comes down to this sense of psychological strength or emotional fitness. And what I mean by that is this. Discipline never works long term. Never. What works is when you become addicted to something positively new. You trade one addiction for another. When you shift from having to doing something to wanting to do something. So our focus is how to make that happen. But I'd say this to you. If you want to change a relationship, the number one thing you have to do is master your own emotions. If you don't do that, forget it. There's no hope. And what's wonderful, though, is it's easy to do if you know how. But none of us have been taught really emotional leadership. Emotional management is the very minimum, much less how to direct and shape ourselves. I don't mean faking your emotions. I don't mean pushing them down. I don't believe in positive thinking, although you may think that from watching, you know, some of the media coverage. I am not into positive thinking. I'm not here tonight to tell you to go to your garden and say, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds. You know? I'm very clear that I believe that life is about leadership and being truthful to yourself. And so I believe, number one, that the mandate for any great relationship and the mandate for anybody to lead their own life and not be a follower is you got to see things as they are, but not worse than they are. Because that's where most people go. That's where they go in relationship. That's why they start to tear it down. That's why the relationship starts to break down, because people get scared when it isn't working out, and then they make it worse than it is so they don't have to try. Because they don't want to try again and be disappointed. They don't want to feel that sense of rejection. They don't want to feel that sense of failure. So most people make it much worse than it is. People tell me all the time, oh, I'm skeptical or I'm pessimistic. I said, no, you're gutless. It takes no guts. It takes no courage to be a pessimist, to say it's not going to work, to try to find out what's wrong. What's wrong is always available. It's always what's right. So I'm not into positive thinking, but I am into intelligence. And intelligence says, see it as it is. Don't make it worse than it is. I mean, people all the time say, my problem is I'm big bone. No, you're frickin' fat. Tell the truth. You know, what is this big bone story? You know, the only way it gets better is if you can see how it is. Don't make it worse than it is. Don't try to make it so it's impossible to change. That's not true. It's not true at all. The second mandate, I think, to changing anything in your life, to leading your life, is once you see it as it is, not worse than it is, then you got to see it better than it is. Because that's the thing that's missing from most relationships. There's no vision. I mean, without a vision, in the Bible it says people what? Perish. And when a relationship has no vision for greater than where they are, that relationship is going downhill, if not destroyed. I believe that every relationship, every part of life, every part of a human being needs a compelling future. If the future is not more compelling than today, today could be tough, but if the future is compelling, we can get there. And that's what every leader does. And every one of you in this room, and I know some of you are here, I guess, from the general public as well, just for your own relationships, I really acknowledge you for. But I know that you're from the military here, I know the therapists here, people from all walks of life. You're all leaders. What's your job? To lead. Your job is to help people see it as it is, not worse than it is. What's your job? Help them create a compelling future. See it better than it is, so there's a reason to give my all again. Otherwise, there's just no juice. There's no energy. Why? They'll go through the motions, complain with each other, not really believe it's going to work, and nothing will change. And then finally, the third step that we've all got to do if we're going to change our life or anybody else's is make it the way we see it. And that's where strategy comes in. I try to take things that are complex and make them as simple as possible. I've noticed most people in the psychological world try to make it as complex as humanly possible. Because it makes us feel so sophisticated when we can talk with all these complex words and elements and so forth, and we can really, you know, we got our degrees and we're somebody. But you know what? That doesn't help anybody. So I look for a nickel word to get to the heart of something. I've tried to take something complex and make it simple so that people really will apply it. And that's the focus here.